What kind of learner are you, and what does this mean for deciding how and with what tools you're going to learn a new language?
Do you want to learn a language?
I'm already having some regrets about that, but I might keep it in. There are so many apps, classes, and language opportunities out there that it can be a bit overwhelming, and you may have also had bad experiences and be a bit afraid of investing your time and sometimes your money in a language learning experience that may not work for you. So, I would like to give you a question that will hopefully help you identify what kind of language learner you are and therefore what sort of classes, apps, and experiences will work best for you. I want you to ask yourself, am I a pattern identifier or am I a pattern learner? Pattern identifiers tend to be able to find patterns where other people see chaos. They pick up the patterns on their own. They don't need to be taught them. And in fact, they often find it very frustrating to be taught patterns because when they're taught patterns, they're also taught the exceptions to those patterns and they go, wait, how are you calling it a pattern if there's exceptions? But when they discover the pattern for themselves, even if they find exceptions, they tend to absorb it really quickly and it just sticks with them. Pattern learners are the opposite in pretty much every way. They're not great at seeing patterns in the chaos, but if you teach them a pattern, they're going to pick up on it really fast. And if you teach them exceptions to the pattern, they will probably be absolutely fine with saying, okay, this is the pattern and these are the exceptions. And while many people fall in the middle, most people lean pretty strongly to one side or the other. I, for example, am definitely a pattern identifier. In terms of language learning tools and methods, pattern identifiers tend to do better in more immersive settings where they can figure out the patterns for themselves, which makes sense. They don't do as well in the classroom and in situations where things are explained to them, so they do better with immersive experiences and immersive apps. Examples of immersive apps would be Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, and to a certain extent, Ling Languages. Pattern learners, on the other hand, tend to do better in a more didactic setting, like a classroom, where things are explained to them, and often struggle a lot with the immersive environment and trying to find the patterns for themselves. However, if they're taught the pattern in a clear way, they pick up on it super fast. So, pattern learners tend to do better in standard classroom settings and with more didactic apps such as Mango, Lingodeer, and to a certain extent, Ling Languages. Ling Languages falls very much in the middle. Putting yourself in the wrong setting for your language learning style can not only be very frustrating, it can be extremely counterproductive. So, for example, I'm very much a pattern identifier. My father is very much a pattern learner. My father went and did an immersive French program in France where all the classes were 100% in French, and he was living with a French host family. And he describes it as, and I quote, one of the worst experiences of my entire life. On the other hand, he learned Spanish in a classroom setting where things were explained to him in English to explain the grammar and then applied in Spanish. And then once he had that, he ended up becoming pretty fluent in Spanish by then joining a soccer team where most of the people who were on that team were native Spanish speakers. And once he had the basis, he was great. Meanwhile, I speak 8 languages and I nearly failed high school Spanish. And I also had to drop out of college Chinese at one point. Shocking, right? But I did the exact same French intensive program as my dad, loved it so much that I ended up doing it for 2 more weeks and ended up getting really communicative in French in a super short period of time. And now when I go to France, I feel super comfortable talking to people, even though I'm nowhere near fluent yet. And I picked up my Mongolian and Thai in purely immersive settings with no classes at all. But when I was failing my high school Spanish classes, I was 100% convinced that I could not learn languages. And I was depressed and I had a lot of self loathing from it. Now, what should you do if you're not really sure what kind of learner you are? Most likely, this means that you're one of the people that falls in the middle, and so you want to figure out which way you lean. One easy way to do this is download some of the free language apps that I mentioned, one that leans much more immersive and one that leans much more didactic, and then figure out which one you're doing better with. Another one is simply to look back at your school experience when you were being taught a language. Did you do well in the classroom? You're more likely a pattern learner. Did you struggle in the classroom even though people told you you were communicating great? You're probably a pattern identifier. And of course, if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in the comments below. If this video has been useful to you, please give a like and click follow because there is a lot more language and educational content as well as just weird content to come. Thank you!